This week, we are going to be covering procedures, functions, and triggers. These are all really powerful objects that are stored with your database, and they utilize scripting. So the scripting that you learned last week, you're going to be applying while you are creating these objects. Make sure you read your chapter first and then go through the lecture demo. So we kind of start in with a little summary of what a stored procedure, UDF, and a trigger are. There are some similarities, but there are some differences too. They're created for different purposes, and that is what is kind of highlighted here. And then to help you further differentiate, I also created a little table where you can compare each one, and you can compare them to a script. Now, you will be practicing all of these in the textbook assignment, but this lecture demo goes through and provides all sorts of examples on a variety of procedures. We start very simple, and then we get into procedures that accept parameters, input parameters, input and output parameters, and procedures that return a value. Then we get into UDFs, which are functions that you create. So far, we have been using the functions that are part of SQL, and now you get the opportunity to create and use your own functions. And then finally, we get into triggers, which are actually one of my favorite features. They're super powerful. You basically create code that is triggered or run by an event. And the events that serve as triggers would be adding data, updating data, or deleting data. So you can specify that, if data is deleted from a particular table, you want it written to an archive table so you have a record of it. That can be set up as a trigger. So the minute a deletion occurs, that data is automatically written to the other table. So, triggers are super powerful, and they are used quite a bit by database administrators. So once you have finished reading through this document, then you are ready for your textbook assignment, which is going to give you practice on the various types of procedures, UDFs, and triggers. So by the time you are done with this, you should be pretty familiar with how to create all three. And you should be ready for the last part of your term project. And that is to create your own procedures, UDFs, and triggers that you will use in your term project. So for the procedures, you need a procedure that retrieves and displays data, which is the simplest kind. You will also need a procedure that has at least one input parameter. You'll need a procedure that has at least one input and one output parameter, and you'll need a fourth procedure that returns data. Okay, so you need 4 procedures. For user-defined functions, you will need 2 of them. You need a scalar function that accepts an argument, and you need a table function that accepts at least one argument. For triggers, you need a trigger that will add deleted data from one of your tables into an archive or a transaction table. So the archive or transaction table does need to be created before you create the trigger. And the textbook assignment does show you how to do that. You need an insert trigger that adds to the archive or transaction table when a row is inserted. And you'll also need an update trigger that adds to the archive or transaction table when a row is modified. Okay, so you will need 3 different triggers, one for inserts, one for additions, and one for updates. Okay, and that is the last part of your term project. And if you wanted to see an example, I do have an example here of what I did for the Sugar Baker fictional bakery project. And you should also have examples in the textbook assignment and in the lecture demo, as well as in the textbook itself. If you want more information on anything covered this week, I have it under course resources. Okay? If you feel a little fuzzy about triggers, there is another little tutorial you can walk through. And here is a SQL file that creates the database and tables that are used in that tutorial. Not required, but if you feel like you need a little bit more practice, it is there for you. Okay? If you run into any problems or if you have questions, please let me know. For the final project milestone, that is not due for a couple weeks, so you have plenty of time to get it done. But if you do have problems or questions, please let me know because I am here to help you. And have an awesome week.